Happy Thanksgiving Eve and welcome to Fantasy Football Today DFS. My name is Sia Najad, and as always, even at this new time, I'm joined by Meg Schaup and Mike McClure. We want to get into this 3-game slate. We want to talk maybe a little pointers on how to address these shorter slates, which for the record, we've seen, Meg, over the last 2 weeks when we're talking the afternoon slate, and we've gotten some feedback that people starting to play those slates and have some good fortune. I think we're all kind of a fan. I know, Meg, we have a history of talking about these slates. Let's start right there. Are there one or two things, Meg, that you like to do or like to consider when you're talking these short slates? I'll go to you and then Mike on this one.
Sure. And yeah, like you said, you and I like to talk about this. We've talked about this in the past. It allows you to be creative, right? So it allows you to do things different than a big or a main slate. You can play the defense against your quarterback. You can totally do a team on or game onslaught. You could play 2 running backs from the same team. Obviously, one of the teams I think certainly lends itself to that in this slate. Just gives you permission to be creative and not kind of follow DFS rules that I think we've gotten used to.
Yeah, and one thing, Mike, before I turn to you, one thing I'll say is that, again, remember I read that lineup off that won $700 that really, like, if you really look at it objectively, had no business winning that much money. But the reason it did is because, in my case, my contest selection, it was a $100 single entry that only had 334 people in it. Well, that same contest is available at the $100 mark, but at other lower cost marks too. So the smaller the contest, the more you can get away with maybe not being as crazy and as creative as you think you would need to be in a 10,000 person contest or a 100,000 person contest. So contest selection on slates like this, I think, are really, really important. Mike, anything to add when it comes to roster construction on a short slate like this?
Yeah, I would say roster construction is extremely important, and so is contest selection, right? So it's more sensitive than like a main slate. In the sense that you need to understand what the contest you're playing is. Are you playing a small field with 100 entries? Is it single entry? Or are you trying to win a Millie Maker that's like a $5 Millie Maker tomorrow? It's going to make your lineup construction and the game theory a lot different. The biggest thing I would say is one way to separate on a small slate like that is never spend the entire salary cap. That is definitely a way to certainly get to certain spots. Other examples would just be like, you're only playing with 3 games. You're not playing a 12-game slate. So like the scenario where Chicago, for example, Roshan outscores DeAndre Swift, extremely possible. Even to the sense when you look at Green Bay backup running back situation, it's very possible that one of those backup running backs gets in the end zone. It's very possible that someone like Tim Patrick outperforms Jameson Williams, things like that.
Yeah.
And it's not uncommon on these slates like this when I'm playing them to leave $3,000 to $4,000 of salary.
Very interesting. And I'm glad because we're going to get into this Lions-Bears game to start things off. There's so many arguments for so many players. And so don't forget about the fact that, hey, maybe it's the Sam Laporta game, especially if you're in the bigger contest. Maybe it's the Sam Laporta game and not the Amon-Ra St. Brown or Jameson Williams game. Maybe it's David Montgomery, who's probably going to slip a little because of the injury news. We'll see, relative to Jahmyr Gibbs, for example. I do just housekeeping stuff, our contest. The link to our $5 Thanksgiving slate 3-game slate contest is in the chat. It'll also be in the description to this podcast. If you're watching us or listening to us later, we're going to have our 3 games we're going to talk about and then our cheat sheets and Mike's top 3 at each position. Let's get started. Bears, this line's coming down a little bit. Mike, I'm going to start with you. Bears, I think it was plus 11. I'm seeing plus 9.5 in certain places. So Bears getting a little bit of respect here. The total's 48.5. It's the largest total on the board, but I do have to mention this Dolphins-Packers game still at 47. So, I mean, these basically mirror each other. Something really to, I think, recognize since we have the pristine conditions in Detroit and not so much in Green Bay. Still, these totals almost mirror each other. Mike, how you start, like, this is going to be a game that people are going to want to stack. They're going to want to have most of their involvement in this game. Are you doing that as well? And if so, is the roster construction just going to be different?
Yeah, I think you're definitely getting pieces from this game. I like the Bears side quite a bit. Honestly, I think they're going to be in that situation where they're getting to throw the football a ton. And frankly, they've looked a lot better of late. Caleb Williams has looked a lot better. The offense has looked a lot better. And it helps having all the receivers out there with Keenan Allen, DJ Moore, Rome Odunze. When I look at this particular Bears team, they're a playoff team to me. They're playing like a playoff team. I look at like where I got them rated, they're a top 8 team in the NFC, and they're certainly not priced like it a lot of the time right now. So I like this particular spot a lot. You could talk about the Lions. The Lions they're a juggernaut. They've been scoring at will. More interest in the Bears side than the Lions side, but I will say, let's see, my highest owned player on the Lions is definitely going to be Sam Laporta.
Oh, I love that. I love that I just referenced Sam Laporta, and that's what you threw out there. All right, Meg, I'm going to go to you on this one. I love what he just said. A couple of things I should note here. Little spoiler on my cheat sheet. I'm going to have a Bears stack as my favorite stack, but you might be a little surprised at the receiver that I pick in that Bears stack. With that said, I just was on the early edge at 10 o'clock, and I put my picks just like Mike and Meg, you do on Sportsline. One of my plays is Caleb Williams over 227.5 passing yards. I actually like his pass attempts, maybe his pass completions as well at 33.5 and 21.5 respectively. But I think Mike's right. Negative game script, most likely. You don't really run on the Detroit Lions. That's just not how you attack the Lions. You attack them with the air raid. And it looks like under Thomas Brown, Caleb Williams is not fixed necessarily, but maybe we're seeing some of the potential that a lot of people thought we were going to see when he came into his rookie season. Do you like the Bears side? And I got to think you'll love some Lions.
Yes, of course. I am interested in Caleb. That was a great call out on his lot prop line. I think I'm really interested in that. We saw he threw for, I believe, over 300 last week. Since, as you guys both mentioned, since Thomas Brown took over, he looks better. He's getting the ball out quicker. So I really do like the Bears side in a, like you guys said, a likely negative game script, throwing often. And so I like Caleb and likely double stacking him. And obviously you can rotate between his three main receivers. And then, of course, on the Lions side, I think you have to have at least one or two Lions at minimum. The team with likely to score the most points on this slate. I think you got to have some Lions in your lineup. I like the running backs the most in this game, and I think you can play them together. And I kind of alluded to that in the intro, but I have no problems playing Gibbs and Montgomery together, or certainly either one. I think there will be a min one Lions running back in my lineup for sure. I actually have a little more interest in Jamison Williams. We've seen the last couple of weeks against the Bears that we've seen the kind of deep shot number 2 receivers get there. Yeah. Most notably Jordan Addison last week. So I have a little interest in Jamison Williams. He can always kind of break a slate. He's fun. And I'm seeing him coming in at lower ownership than the other Lions.
Yeah, so here's the thing. As much as I might like Sam Laporta as kind of a splash surprise play, I also love Jamison Williams. So I don't want to cause any confusion there. I completely agree with you on Jamison Williams. And you're right to bring up Jordan Addison. The week before, it was Christian Watson. These wide receiver 2s are really enjoying some success relative to wide receiver 1s who really aren't faring well against the Bears. So, I mean, when you're looking at an Amon-Ra St. Brown, Meg, I'm going to go to you and then Mike on this one. We can't play everybody, right?
Right.
I'm just going to say it right now. I am going to, when it comes to the Lions, I'm going to be cycling through a lot of players. Not that I have a ton of lineups, but it's going to be Jahmyr Gibbs over David Montgomery for me. It's going to be some Sam Laporta. It's going to be a decent amount of Jamison Williams, and I might throw in like a Tim Patrick here and there. I believe he's 3,500. Well, we can go ahead. I know not as cycling through. We can go ahead and double check that. Those are the guys I'm playing, which to me, I mean, if I'm just making sense of what I just said, Meg, I'm out on Amon-Ra St. Brown. I don't want to play him at his price. I'm not saying he's going to get shut down, but I don't think he's going to hit a ceiling game. I'd much rather see Jamison or Sam Laporta hit their ceiling outcomes. Your thoughts on Amon-Ra St. Brown?
Very similar in that of the Lions that I'm playing, I'm going to get to Amon-Ra the least, or I might be fading him because I'm likely just playing, 5 lineups. So I will not be playing most likely Amon-Ra. And that's scary, but this is actually not a super tightly priced slate. And like Mike said, you can leave pricing or salary on the table. So I just have no problem, honestly, fading him and leaning heavily into the running game, leaning heavily into the splash play type receiver like Jamison Williams. So yeah, I'm kind of with you there on Amon-Ra.
Yeah, Mike, here's the thing is Meg brought up a really good point. I mean, I'd like your opinion on this too. The pricing it seems to me a little soft, which to me caters to the idea that people were going to want to just put in Amon-Ra St. Brown to their lineups because they can. And I think that's why we're seeing, correct me if I'm wrong, his popularity from an ownership standpoint looks like pretty extreme. So I am happy to fade him. How about you?
Yeah, I think he's going to be popular. I definitely think you can fade. The thing that's you're right about soft pricing here is you can essentially jam Amon-Ra and CD Brown and CD Lamb into lineups if you want to, which is obviously a great thing. Two elite receivers that get a lot of targets in a dome. I'm not going to play a ton of Amon-Ra, mostly just I think that the Lions can really spread the ball out. And I know we've seen them put up 30 plus points and really everyone get there. I think this game's a little more competitive though. And I think the Chicago defense is solid. I think Chicago's offense is going to move the ball a bit. So I'm not going to be like full on onslaughting Lions in the majority of my stuff. But if you like Amon-Ra, I mean, I think he's totally fine. If you're going to do that with Amon-Ra, I would definitely play him with Jared Goff if you're going to do it. Because I think at his price point and ownership, you're going to need multiple touchdowns.
Quick question before we move on to the next game. And I will note we're on the Fantasy Football Today YouTube channel, on Fantasy Football Today Twitter right now. I just retweeted it. Hit the like button if you could. But if you're watching us on Twitter and you want to ask some questions like Kirk Schroyer, Grey Goose, James, Zachary R., come over to the Fantasy Football Today YouTube page and make comments or ask questions. Always hit the like button. Always review the podcast if you can. Here's the question before we move on to the next game, Giants-Cowboys. Meg, I'm going to start with you. I want you to rank, in terms of likelihood to play, I want you to rank these three Chicago Bear receivers. DJ Moore, 5,600. Keenan Allen, 5,100. Rome Odunze, flat 5K.
I'm struggling. I'm going to be honest. I'm struggling with this, but I'm going to go ahead and say Rome Odunze, DJ Moore, Keenan Allen. Okay,
Mike, that's my order as well. I understand why you would chase the box score for Keenan Allen last week. I like DJ Moore. It's just I like Rome Odunze's upside. I know his floor is lower or lowest, perhaps. I like his upside more. So rank those three wide receivers.
Yeah, I've still got Keenan number one. Just I've seen a much bigger body of work throughout his career, and I like him in those situations. So what I liked when I saw that, I know that Caleb may not go key in on him a lot, but in certain situations, especially if we get any sort of negative game script here where we're actually down 10 plus points, the thing that I really like about Keenan Allen is we've seen that every stop in his career where he will have 3 to 4 catches in 5 plays, right? So it'll be literally just throw the ball for 6 yards to Keenan Allen, throw the ball for 6 yards to Keenan Allen. So for me personally, Allen is still going to be number one, but having said that, I like all three. And I will have many Caleb doubles and triples in this particular spot.
All right. Caleb doubles and Caleb triples. That's something you can do on a 3-game slate like this and run it back with a couple of Bears as well. Looks like Doug Craig says Miami onslaught. Well, we're going to get to the Miami game, but first we got to get to the Giants and the Cowboys. We're going to do it right after we hear a message from our partners. All right, we're back on Fantasy Football Today, DFS. We got 2 more games to go through and then our cheat sheets and Mike's top 3 at each position. This one, Mike, I'll start with you, has maybe a little less fanfare, right? It's the Giants at the Cowboys. It's a 37-point total, which is 10 points less than the other 2 games. Still some hot, names here with your CeeDee Lambs and your Malik Neighbors. Tyrone Tracy starting to gain some steam, rightfully so, although he has had the fumbling issues. He's 5,800. Rico Dowdle makes a lot of sense from a volume standpoint in a positive game script, potentially at 5,500. Schoonmaker, 3,400. Mike, what do we like in this one?
Look, I think CeeDee Lamb and Rico Dowdle will be the 2 most popular plays on the entire slate over on DraftKings. So I think they're fine. It's hard to get away from Rico at 5,500. Just the volume should be there. The game script should basically be as good as it possibly can be for the current state of the Cowboys. It's hard to also get away from the Cowboys defense, right? So you got that obvious correlation with Rico Dowdle and just the price points are so good. So I am expecting them to be extremely popular. I think CeeDee Lamb and Rico Dowdle will be 60+% owned in this spot. Now, again, you hear 60%, you freak out. It's a 3-game slate. It's not a 10-game slate. So you do have to consider that there. I think Malik Neighbors is fine if you want to pivot away. I do have some concerns at quarterback. I would feel way better about Malik Neighbors if it was Drew Lock playing. So we really don't know if Tommy DeVito is going to play in this game or not. Once we get that information, I would have some interest there. And then Tyrone Tracy, Theo Johnson, if you want to get a little different at tight end, I think is super interesting. He's definitely like Theo Johnson's definitely the play that if he lands in the end zone at 2,900 could absolutely outscore Sam Laporta on this slate. And could very well be a difference maker. So that's something to consider. Again, I would feel much better if Drew Lock was playing quarterback than Tommy DeVito. So my overall position on this game, I can't really give you too much until I know who the starting quarterback is going to be.
Yeah, good call, because I'm looking for updated information on Drew Lock as we speak, and we don't have anything. Of course, Daniel Jones, we know he just signed with the Minnesota Vikings, which certainly an interesting signing, probably a good one for Minnesota given where they're at right now in the playoff and the race to the Super Bowl. But yeah, I agree. Drew Lock changes, Meg, the perspective a little bit here. What do we like in this game, Meg Show?
Yeah, I agree with Mike that if Drew Lock were to play, I'd have a lot more interest in Neighbors, but we do have a little squeaky wheel narrative going on with Neighbors that makes me a little bit intrigued here. Yeah. I have a lot of interest in Lamb, of course, and Neighbors a little bit, again, more so if Lock plays. I will say if you want to get contrarian, doing like a Rush Lamb Schoonmaker stack could be kind of just interesting. Again, we're not really searching for that much value, but I just think that's an interesting approach. We've seen Rush actually put up some decent yardage totals. He had 2 touchdowns last week, unfortunately for us. But so, I mean, and obviously his matchup's not daunting against the Giants here. So I think that's like a contrarian approach. There's a different stack that I like much more. And I also like Caleb. So that's just one approach I'm taking. I'm actually likely not going to fade Dowdle just because he's so high owned. And I know Mike made a good point. It's a short slate, not to be too, scared off by the massive ownership. But if he fails, that's a way to get a little leverage piece. And, like last week, he had a great matchup too against Washington. He had 85 yards, but he didn't get a touchdown. So if you can like kind of dodge that, and again, we're not that desperate for price, savings, then I have a little interest in fading Dowdle for ownership leverage and getting some of those high price running backs that I really, really like.
Yeah, I completely understand the fade Rico scenario for maybe some higher ceilings. Are there any role players? Like, I mean, you mentioned Theo Johnson, Mike McClure. I mentioned Schoonmaker at 3,400. The backup receivers, behind Malik Neighbors and CeeDee Lamb, I feel like this is not the game to go to when, like, we can speculate, I think, more wildly in this Green Bay Miami game relative to this one. We got Brandon Cooks, Jalen Tolbert, Darius Slayton, Wan'Dale Robinson. Like, nothing's screaming out to me here. Micah, anybody that's showing up for you?
Yeah, I think the obvious one to me is Wan'Dale Robinson, and the only this is a great example of like trying to win a million maker kind of situation, right? Mm-hmm. So like you like the Dallas Cowboys side potentially, and they get out to a lead. The Giants want to push, they want to throw. Like there's no real projection model that's going to put Wan'Dale Robinson above Keenan Allen, right? But there's absolutely a scenario where like Malik Neighbors is injured. Malik Neighbors is getting locked down. Whatever it is, Wan'Dale Robinson, we've seen him have games where he does approach double-digit targets. If he does get that in scores, like there's definitely a very real scenario where he, at 4,700, outscores every single one of the Chicago Bears receivers, right? So it's just something you need to potentially build for. It's not something you're doing in your top 3 lineups. If you're playing a lot of lineups in a tournament in the Million Maker, like those are the scenarios that you should build and play for in a big top-heavy Million Maker slate on a small slate like this.
All right. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. In or out, Meg, I'm going to go to you, Mike, on this one too before we move on to Dolphins-Packers. The Tyrone Tracy experience has been really interesting because he's clearly a pretty great running back. I shouldn't say great. He's clearly a pretty good running back, much better than Devin Singletary, Eric Gray. With that said, he's had the fumbling issues, but he's only 5,800. He does seem to me like a guy that if this game has a bit of a back and forth and has some scoring, Tyrone Tracy could be the guy that enjoys a lot of that. Your thoughts on playing him for the Thanksgiving slate, Meg?
Yeah, I think that is an excellent point, and definitely in the range of outcomes that he could, be one of the higher scoring running backs. Certainly a good matchup against the Cowboys. The fumbling issues are a little, do make me a little nervous because again, if he does it, he's likely going to get pulled. We've seen him get pulled. He's got a short leash there. So I just have a lot more interest in the higher priced running backs, kind of across the board on this slate. We talked about the 2 Detroit running backs that I loved. I have some interest in the running backs in the next game that we'll talk about. So I kind of just land there, is that I'm kind of leaning into the higher priced running backs and don't have a lot of interest in Dowdle and Tracy.
Mike, your thoughts on Tracy?
Yeah, I'm probably not getting there right away. I like it certainly could work out for you there. Kind of like Megan, a lot of the initial lineups for me, I think Devon Achane and Jahmyr Gibbs could both just absolutely end your slate. So, and I think it's extremely unlikely that a wide receiver does it. I think it's considering the quarterback situations, I think it's unlikely that CeeDee Lamb, Malik Neighbors, and Amon-Ra St. Brown end your slate. Because I do think that some of the Bears receivers, some of the Dolphins receivers could put you in a very similar range. Like I think that Tracy is a fantastic player. Wouldn't shock me if he had a massive run, 50-yard touchdown in this game. The thing I would call out on that is he's clearly the lead back, right? He outscored Devin Singletary by 1 point in the last game. And that's because Devin Singletary got the goal line carry, right? So perfect example. Obviously in this slate, you would have saved $1,000 with Singletary. Like the same, we'll talk about it with the Miami game, but Raheem Mostert, no one's going to play Raheem Mostert. We've seen him get touches at the goal line many times, particularly in this game that's going to be super cold weather. Like you can play these backup running backs. If you're considering guys like Dowdle and Tracy, there is a very decent chance that one of those backups could match them in the scenario that Tracy or Dowdle do not have big games.
Totally makes sense. And I'll tell you, Achane and Gibbs, those are going to be my primary running backs, which, again, it's a little chalky, but you all have to understand too, I'm not entering the Millie Maker with 150 lineups. I'm entering those 334 person contests, the 666. I'll get up to 1,000 and maybe even more, but a lot of my lineups are going to be those smaller contests where I can afford to play those two running backs and get different elsewhere, maybe with a slightly different Caleb stack or double stack or things of that nature. Let's move on to the Dolphins and the Green Bay Packers. This is at night, 8:20 Eastern Standard Time, Thanksgiving night, 47-point total. We've got the Packers favored by 3.5 here. This is an interesting game because Mike, I know I heard you earlier this week talk about the Miami Dolphins. So I'm going to start with you here. This is one of those games where the narrative on Tua might keep the ownership low on some of these Miami Dolphins not named Devon Achane. So your thoughts on how to play this one?
Yeah, I like the Miami side for sure. I've talked about them a lot. I played Tua almost exclusively last week, which was obviously a great week because of that. I think it's a very different situation this time around. I think the offense is drastically different. When you look at the way that Devon Achane has impacted this offense and Jonnu Smith. Jonnu Smith has been a very welcome addition here, and it's really that safety valve for Tua. We've seen these high variance outcomes from Tua a lot because Tyreek Hill and Waddle are electric down the field, but he never really had some of those checkdowns. So you really get to those high variance outcomes. That's not the case now. I think we're getting more consistent outcome because of Jonnu Smith over the middle of the field. First of all, he's hard to tackle and bring down in space, but he's just got this unique ability to sit down. And the reason for it is because of the threat of Devon Achane coming out of the backfield along with Tyreek Hill anywhere on the field with his speed. And then of course, Jalen Waddle. So I personally have no real concerns about the cold. Jonnu Smith has definitely played in the cold at Tennessee. He's played in the cold in New England. So I personally think that this is a fantastic spot for them. And I honestly, I like Tyreek Hill a ton here in this game.
We're going to get to your top three quarterbacks, but I assume Tua makes the cut there, Mike.
Yeah, he will be one of the three for sure.
All right, Meg, are you playing this one? Again, I like the Bears and the Lions one as much as the next person. That's probably my favorite game to explore, but not that this is going to be an unpopular game, but this does feel like a game that's kind of getting a lower billing, and I get why, but are you going to have a lot of ownership in this one, or are you just taking pieces?
Yes, I am. And first of all, shout out to Mike on the Tua stack last week. That was amazing. I've been on Jonnu for a few weeks now.
You have.
And I absolutely love, he was also a best ball favorite of mine. So I hope he keeps going here for me. And absolutely am very in on Dolphins stacks this week. Tua, Jonnu, Achane, mix in obviously Hill and or Waddle. I absolutely love the Dolphins side. And I think to Mike's point about the narrative, you remember 2 years ago, and I got beat by this narrative, it was Kirk Cousins can't play on prime time. Well, he did play very well on prime time, and he was low owned. He came in low owned against the Patriots that night, and he was, It's the quarterback, I believe, that you wanted to play. So I think sometimes these narratives get overblown. I think Tua is getting the ball out quicker, and in the cold, that's, I think, less of a concern. He's getting the ball out much quicker since he's come back. So I really like Tua, and if people want to lean into the don't play Tua in the cold narrative, I will happily take the ownership discount.
Mike, let's talk a little bit about the other side of the ball, because I believe it was you last week that mentioned Josh Jacobs, said he could, with his volume, he could have one of those big games. But you did mention earlier in this show that we could see one of the backup running backs like Emmanuel Wilson, because he's looked pretty good, even though he's not really getting the volume. What's your interest on the Packers side, whether it be with the running backs or the receiver position? We know Romeo Doubs probably not playing. I take a look at a guy like Dontavian Wicks, and on a slate like this at 4,200, I'm more willing to speculate on somebody like him, or even a Tucker Kraft and a 2 tight end lineup at 3,700. Any thoughts on that Green Bay side? And then Meg, I'm going to go to you.
Yeah, Jacobs is interesting. I love the fact I played him last week a lot, but that had way more to do with the 49ers rolling out, not an NFL level team, right? And they were just beat up everywhere. Difficult spot. I don't like Jacobs this week. Miami's defense has been fantastic, particularly their run defense. And I think that him scoring 3 touchdowns, the weather the way it is, he's going to garner some ownership. However, he is going to really need to get in the end zone multiple times. He doesn't catch the football a ton. And frankly, he's not as explosive as he used to be. He's nowhere near Devon Achane or Jahmyr Gibbs, but he is near them in terms of price point. So I'm not going to be playing him, because the way Miami's going to force Jordan Love to throw the football here, right? Josh Jacobs should not have a ton of success in this particular matchup. So I will not be playing Jacobs. I like Wicks just simply because he's cheap. I like Kraft, but mostly not going to play a ton of Packers here, as I think that it's going to be extremely spread out and random as far as who gets there and who doesn't. So way more interest in the Miami side. Okay,
Meg, your thoughts on playing Josh Jacobs? Are you in or out on him? Again, volume, I mean, is a thing here. So I can understand being in on him. I agree with Mike. I'm probably out. And do you think you're going to play or speculate on any of these pass catchers for the Packers?
Yeah, I'm similar to Mike in that I have lower interest in the Packers in general, just because it's so spread out too, just of all their playmakers. So Josh Jacobs is in my pool, but he's lower down in the pool of the running backs. So again, I have interest in these high price running backs. Jacobs is one of them for the volume reasons, but he's lower, definitely lower down. And then as far as I have interest in like Wicks and Kraft, and the receivers aren't that high price, so I definitely have interest. But I think it would be like a max 1 situation. I don't think I'm getting to it like similar to Mike said. I don't think I'm getting to a lot of Packers, period.
Yeah, that makes sense. Well, okay, so Mike, to that point, if you're in on Tua and you're in on Achane and just the whole Dolphins experience, can you maybe give me an example of, not a full lineup, of course, but like how you would play this game in a Tua stack situation?
Yes, I can pull up the Tua stacks as we speak. Jonnu Smith, Tyreek Hill, Devon Achane, essentially a full-on onslaught is the preferred way. The only bring back I have is Dontavian Wicks because of the price point. I'll give you a whole other lineup because this one is fascinating. Go ahead and play it if you want to. We'll probably all tie. Tua, Jahmyr Gibbs, Devon Achane, Keenan Allen, Christian Watson, Tyreek Hill, Sam Laporta, Jonnu Smith, and the Lions defense.
Very interesting. I know, Meg, that was music to your ears, the first one, where I think that was a Tua stack. He didn't mention Tua, but it was Tua with Achane, Tyreek Hill, and Jonnu Smith. That's got to be pretty appetizing to you.
Yeah, absolutely. I like the whole onslaughting the Dolphins side. I really do. Because I don't think a lot of people are going to approach it that way. We're seeing low ownership on Tua, so I don't think people are going to go overboard with that.
And the thing is, the way you build, I mean, those guys are relatively expensive, but it still allows you to go into that Lions Bears game and grab a couple of pieces. So, I mean, again, to your point, Meg, the pricing is a little soft. So if you want to get a little different with your Miami onslaught, you can still grab pieces in those games. Like I'm not building the lineup, but put Jahmyr Gibbs in that lineup and maybe a low price Tim Patrick or Rome Odunze and make those types of lineups work completely. Kirk asks, what DST do you guys like? I mean, the Cowboys jump off the page to me. Meg, any other defenses that jump out to you?
Yeah, I mean, obviously we know that the variance is so high with defenses. So, certainly don't let that be the deciding factor. And obviously I'm sure the Cowboys will be the highest owned, but yeah, I will definitely have the most interest in the Cowboys. And then it's probably just going to honestly be what fits.
All right. And Andrew had a question about Tua and the Dolphins in the cold. I think we did address that a few minutes ago. We're not quite as worried about that, especially when we're talking DFS. I think if we were having a betting conversation, it might be at least slightly different analysis, but we're talking DFS here. And I think we're kind of in on the Tua experience regardless of the weather. And Andrew has some compliments for the show, but specifically, Meg, for you as well. That's always nice to see and hear. Mike, go ahead.
Yes. So the comment I would make on Tua in cold weather versus normal, I've done some analysis throughout his career in the 4 years, right? The strength of schedule doubles in his cold weather games. So they've all been difficult, tough matchups. So way above average, like would by far be the toughest strength of schedule really for anyone. So I think that's more something to note than anything. I would say 2024, he hasn't played a cold weather game. 2023, he essentially played one. 2022, which is what I think this year is more similar to, he had 4 touchdowns, 2 interceptions, still a 92 passer rating with the most difficult strength of schedule of his career. So I personally don't think there's a lot to that narrative.
Meg, go ahead.
Yeah, and I just wanted to kind of hammer home also that's a great point that Mike said. And also remember, since he's come back from concussion, how much quicker he's getting the ball out too, and letting these playmakers just go make plays for him. So I think that's something that's just different from years past in the narrative.
Right. 100% true. All right. Well, we got to get to our cheat sheet. First, I got to read a very helpful, I'm very thankful for this comment. Quinn McGrath, he says, "Where's Adam? This is stupid." Quinn, it's Thanksgiving Eve. I just want to, I'm very thankful for your contribution to FFT DFS. And I'm sorry that none of us are Adam Azer. He is actually the best. So this is in fact stupid. Thank you again for your contribution, Quinn. Meg's cheat sheet. We do stack, we do chalk buy, chalk fade, contrarian, and value play. Meg, get us started.
Sure. I already kind of leaned into this heavily, but it's going to start with Tua Jonnu. And then, like Mike said, keep adding those Dolphins pieces, rotate it how you like. A-Chain, Hill, Waddle. I think I love the 4-man stack that Mike brought up. So that's my favorite stack. Chalk buy is both Gibbs and Montgomery. I'm seeing ownership on both, and I don't care. I love the Lions running backs. So I'm leaning heavily into that. Either there will probably be a min 1 for me, and I'm not afraid to play both in the same lineup. Chalk fade for me will be Rico Dow. I talked about that. Just let's keep him out of the end zone, and I'll play those higher price running backs. Contrarian play for me is going to be Jameson Williams. I'm seeing lower ownership, I think because of his price point, but again, I'm not really too concerned about pricing overall. So I think that's a fun other piece to get from the Lions that is explosive. And we've seen those number 2 downfield receivers get there against the Bears. So that's my contrarian play is Jameson Williams. And then the value, again, not that you really need it, but I just really like the cheaper. They're all cheap tight ends this week, honestly, but I do like the tight end. I don't mind any tight ends. I don't mind if you wanted to do a double tight end lineup, but Jonnu, Kraft, and Schoonmaker are the 3 tight ends I'm going to be playing. And that's a great source of value.
All right. My cheat sheet is as follows. I'm going Caleb Williams to Rome Odunze, just taking the shot on the low floor, but perhaps high ceiling on Rome Odunze there. Certainly gets a lot of air yards. I saw a stat. I think it was from Jacob Gibbs, but I'm not really sure. So maybe I'm giving credit to the wrong person. He's great, as everybody knows, but Odunze's air yards are pretty tremendous. It's just none of them are catchable. So like I completely get that part of the argument. But again, I'm searching for ceiling here. And I think Rome Odunze is an excellent receiver. I think everybody kind of knows and appreciates that. So I think he can have that spike game. Chalk by Jahmyr Gibbs. I agree with both of you. Gibbs, Achane, they're going to be in, I don't have a ton of lineups. They're going to be in almost every single lineup. Chalk fade, Amon-Ra St. Brown, contrarian, Tim Patrick, Sam Laporta, just trying to get some other receivers, other pass catchers in that Lions game. And my value play, Dontavian Wicks, because as Mike said, of the 3 receivers that we're going to see, if Romeo Doubs does not play, which it's not looking like he will, he's the cheapest of the 3. And we know he's had those good spike games before, although not super recently. All right, Mike, let's do your top 3 at each position, and then we'll get everybody out of here. Start at quarterback.
I'm only going to give you 2 because I will say you could play all 6 quarterbacks. There's definitely a scenario all 6 of them can throw 2 touchdown passes. My favorites, the ones I'll be playing most, Caleb Williams, Tua. I like Caleb Williams in a likely negative game script. We've seen him throw for 350 yards in very similar situations, which could be enough to get you there. When, like I said, you look at the Lions, you've seen those running backs score a lot there. Look at the other quarterbacks on the slate. There is absolutely a scenario here where the Bears lose this game by 15 points. Caleb Williams throws for 350, 1 touchdown, rushes for 40, and is the optimal quarterback on this slate, right? So that is going to be by far the best play for me is going to be Caleb and then Tua.
All right. Dave Richard in the chat. He says, see ya, Mike, check your emails. Thank you. I do need to do that. Okay. Thank you for that, Dave. Thanks for being in the chat also. Okay. Running back, top 3.
Achane and Gibbs, definitely the top 2. After that, I've listed Rico Dowdle here, but I could potentially I'll say this. The first 2 are the ones I really want to play. Rico will make his way in there because of the price point and the volume. I will have a scenario where I play both Achane and Mostert together, though, for the Miami side.
Very, very interesting. By the way, just a quick reminder before we get your top 3 wide receivers. Join the contest, the $5 Thanksgiving slate contest. I think it'll be really good, especially for those of you that don't do short slates a lot. This is a really good contest to join. We'll have the main slate one. We'll talk about it more on Friday. Our main slate show is Friday at 11 o'clock as opposed to Thursday for obvious reasons. So we're going to have 2 different contests. One, the Thanksgiving one, which is already out there. It's in the chat description. It'll be in the YouTube description and podcast description, but also a main slate one for the 10-game main slate on Sunday. All right, top 3 wide receivers, Mike.
Keenan Allen, Tyreek Hill, and Dontavian Wicks. I think no one wants to play Tyreek relative to his skill set, right? Mm-hmm. And the reason for that is you've got CeeDee Lamb, you've got Amon-Ra St. Brown in domes, you've got Malik Neighbors in dome. I just think that we think that Tyreek can't play with the cold weather quarterback in Tua. It's on the road. He still has just absolutely elite speed, absolutely all the opportunity here. So I love Tyreek in this one. I think there's definitely a scenario that he is wide receiver 1 on this slate. Mm-hmm. And Keenan Allen, just the volume and price point, and Dontavian Wicks, the price point and all of my interest on the Miami side makes sense having a little bit of a bring back.
All right. Top 3 tight ends.
Sam Laporta, Jonnu Smith, and Tucker Kraft. Laporta still just too cheap for the skill set. Wouldn't shock me if he's the one that lands in the end zone here in this particular matchup. Jonnu Smith, love Jonnu, definitely going to be in nearly every lineup, probably every lineup. And then Tucker Kraft.
The look, Meg, the smile on your face every time he says Jonnu Smith, because you have been such a champion of him.
I have.
In best ball, but also over the last month or so.
He's been my hero in best ball lately. So I hope, I hope he looks.
He looks like he's like the hot new rookie. It feels like he's been in the league for a couple of decades. It's pretty funny how things work out.
Well, I said all summer he's went with Mike McDaniel. Mike McDaniel's going to find a way to use him right, and so far that take is looking good.
You did say that all summer. All right, ladies and gentlemen, that was an excellent show. We spent a lot of time on just the 3 games, obviously on the Friday 11 o'clock show. We got to go through 10 games. We're going to do it a lot quicker, but this is what you get from us every single time we're on. You get our best, and we try to give you some roster constructions and some ways to look at this a little bit differently. Don't forget, contest selection is a really important part of this as well. The bigger the contest, the more creative perhaps you have to get, but there's some small contests too that are a lot easier to cash in. So always keep that in mind. Well, happy Thanksgiving Eve, everybody. On behalf of Meg Shout, Mike McClure, and me, Sia Najad, this has been Fantasy Football Today, DFS. We'll see you again on Friday at 11 o'clock for the NFL main slate. Have a great Thanksgiving, everyone.